So, and at some point in this journey of overseas and in Texas and California, you decide somehow I'm going to go back home.
Yeah, well, that's probably one of the most interesting parts of the story, actually, is yeah, I mean, eventually I wanted to come back to Nebraska. I kind of had this vision of someday I wanted to make a bunch of money in Silicon Valley and create my own venture fund and start doing startups in Nebraska. So that was always on my mind. But I kind of saw that as a much later in my career sort of thing. And in 2018, I was invited to come back to give a speech at a Big Ten conference here in Nebraska that we hosted at the University of Nebraska Lincoln, and I was in the first intake of the university's international business program. So they asked me to give a presentation. So I came back, and in the process of that, they gave me some tours and kind of brought me up to speed on what was going on here in Nebraska. So I had the opportunity to tour Innovation Campus, which is the old state fairgrounds has turned into like a gigantic incubator space for tech companies, and had the opportunity through that to learn about Invest Nebraska and some of the economic development programs that are going on here, and what was going on with UNMC and their Unimed and Unitech and what they were doing to kind of grow healthcare companies in Nebraska. And so it kind of did get my wheels going. And then as I returned to Silicon Valley, struggling with the really, really difficult business environment. It's, there's so much talent in Silicon Valley that everybody has a propensity to go there and innovate there, but it creates an enormous demand for talent. And so it's tough to recruit and retain talent for any significant period of time. And oftentimes by the time you get somebody trained up and they start to produce, they're on to the next thing. And that combined with the impossible just business environment in California. California is known for a lot of great things, fabulous weather, and it's known for a lot of things. But for being business friendly, it is not known for that. Certainly, it is a very challenging place to do things. Not just expensive, but just everything is so much red tape. And so all of those things combined, I was struggling with. And late one night, I basically stayed up all night thinking, how can I do things differently? And then that matched up with what I had seen in Nebraska, and I thought, yeah, let me think about just moving to Nebraska.
You realized with all the things you saw that you would have at your advantage, and then you start to realize of how better off you would be with the business side of things.
Oh yeah,
keeping the lights on and like, wow, like this, you saw the hurdles that were ahead of you. Mm-hmm. In California and realized which ones were going to be taken away, but yet still had all these advantages.
Yeah, and it caused me, I think, to see Nebraska, a bit differently, and around the same time, another thing that I'd really noticed over the course of my career was early in my career, I felt like particularly a lot of the Silicon Valley companies were taking big risks, doing ambitious things instead of doing incremental innovation, creating completely new platforms. And I felt like, it was getting more and more conservative, partially due to the very expensive business environment, the regulatory environment. And I felt like companies weren't taking much risk and going for the big innovations. Right. And that's the kind of stuff I wanted to do. And as the more I thought about it, the more I realized that perhaps I could do that in Nebraska. And what I've since come to realize is by operating at a lower cost base, we can afford to take risks.
Yep.
And go after the really big innovations. And that's what we're doing with Progressive Neuro. And I also kind of, as I was thinking through, like, how could I create a very cost-effective model for innovation? And as I started to look at places to buy as I moved back to Nebraska, I thought, well, if I have a building with apartments and I have innovation space and I have office space, we could all live together. And instead of paying ourselves, the salaries we need to be able to just make ends meet, the couple $100,000 a year or whatever in San Francisco, we pay ourselves a fraction. We have to raise less capital, or we can take that same amount of capital that we would have in California and hit much more milestones with it, building much more value to the company, and obviously diluting less. And as founders, retaining more of the company. And so that kind of became really the principles behind what ultimately became the Silicon Prairie Center innovation model, and what we're really doing for Progressive Neuro and ATS, and what we'll do for other companies that we incubate here.
Awesome. So, okay. And do you want to give us a little bit of you say ATS and Progressive Neuro, but
Yep.
Can you give us a flavor of what that is?
Yeah, certainly. Progressive Neuro is an ischemic stroke company that we actually started in 2018. But it comes from, many, many years of experience. So I co-founded it with Brett, who I'd worked with at Micros Endovascular. And Brett and I had the opportunity to work with a lot of physicians. And as he was working in R&D, developing technologies, I was bringing in physicians to do what we call upstream marketing, basically get feedback on what the physicians needed. Here's what we're developing. Does this meet your needs? If not, what are we missing? And so we had a lot of data points there. And as we moved on in our careers and went on and did other things, Brett started to kind of think that through as we'd left those companies and started to come up with some ideas that were different than what everybody else was doing in the space. Everybody else is basically using a stent on a wire to try to drag a clot out, or using a catheter, basically a tube, to suck it out. And we had some ideas of how to do things differently to more effectively get the clot out, because the results weren't good. When we started the company, about 50% of the time sucking it out didn't work. And when they used the stent retriever to try to drag it out, they'd have to stick it in, try to drag it out, do that multiple times. And in the meantime, they're losing time, and time is brain. Mm-hmm. The longer the vasculature stays occluded, the more damage it's done to the brain. And so we had some out of the box ideas that that we founded the company on, and we've had a lot of interest in the company, and things are going well now. Patents are starting to issue, and we're really confident in the direction we're taking.
Nice.
And the impact that it will have on patients. So that's ATS, and the other company that we're doing here is that's Progressive Neuro. The other company we're doing here is actually ATS. And ATS is it's basically a mobility tracking technology that allows caregivers to remotely monitor how much patients are getting around. That's really the simplest way to put it. We started, in order to kind of get our feet wet and start getting to know the customers in the space, we developed some very basic technologies and imported technology to hold canes and crutches, and we're building from there. As we learn the space, some of the technologies that you can see right on the set here, they're very basic, and they're actually made in the maker space. We make a few, sell a few, get feedback, modify them, and in the meantime, we're learning a lot more about the lifestyle of these people that have to use mobility devices, and we're using that information to implement into the mobility tracking system.
Awesome. So grandma is home by herself, and you call her and says, "Oh, I'm fine."
Yeah.
This kind of gives you
it gives you an objective data point, because grandma, you call her and she's always going to say she's fine. She may not have gotten out of bed for 3 days.
You want some cookies?
She's going to say, "I'm fine. You want to come over and have some cookies?" But this gives you the ability to know that grandma did get out of bed today. She got out of bed and started moving at 7 a.m. and then she stopped moving it, and it's been in bed since maybe 11 a.m. to 1 a.m. to 1 p.m. and so you can get a sense, an objective sense as to how much they're actually getting around.
Right. And I think you've said too, if the technology is in the cane, and it's not like a band or something grandma wears, grandma might not actually know.
No, exactly. So if you give grandma something to wear around her neck to press at different intervals, or if she's having a problem, it's probably not going to leave her drawer. It might be around her neck when you walk out the door, but an hour later it's in the drawer. But
right.
Awesome. So this is something that we believe will have a higher compliance because it's integrated into the lifestyle.
Hey, Riley here. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Make a Move podcast. For more content, check us out on all major social media platforms and makeamovepodcast.com. Until next time, get off your butt.